Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Windsock. Today, I'm going to start on my Tri-Pacer, and I've thought about this and thought about this. One of the things that I've seen from a lot of scratch builders is a way to get formers and ribs, the template, off of the plans without destroying the plans. So I was doing some smaller scratch building years ago, and my youngest son decided that I needed a light table, and so in his graphic arts deal, he found me a light table, which is perfect because now I can trace these ribs and these formers onto some fairly heavy cardstock. I mean, it's not like huge, but it's plenty fine for what we're doing here. And I can create a set of ribs and formers and any other kinds of patterns that I need off of the plans without even hardly touching the plans. And so we'll get a pencil. My guard dog Chuck lays right at my feet. I put beds in the shop. I put everything in here. He wants to lay right at my feet, so I let him. So anyway, the old trusty pencil out. And to make this a little bit easier to see, I'm going to turn off the overhead light so you can see that I'm transmitting light up through the plan. Alexa, workbench light. So now I hope that you can see from above that you can see right through the cardstock from the plan. Now here, it's very important to note that the rib is not the outside shape, all right? The rib is the skeleton of the wing. So I'm going to be cutting on this line, the most inboard line, including the spar cutouts, Now, this technically is my trailing edge. This rib is near the center of the wing, so it has a full solid trailing edge on it. The farther out you go, you've got flaps, and then you've got ailerons out on the tip. Now, to cut these, this one is going to have to be done in two pieces because I don't have cardstock big enough. Maybe I'll get some to go big enough. But the outermost ribs, I do have a large enough cardstock. So if you see here, this is the trailing edge stock, which you hinge through. All of this is balsa. This actually is a rib. This is a rib to where you have the servo mounts, and so you run a piece of ply onto that rib. Doesn't matter, it's all going to be the same shape. And so what I can do, might as well use as little paper as possible. I like to use a factory edge on the board whenever I can, same as when I'm sawing. I'll do the same. And so we just take and we trace. Now, one thing that's going to be very important here as we go along is when I start cutting out for the spars, I need to make sure that it's a snug fit on the spar stock that I have, right? So when I put the wing together, it's a good fit and it builds true, and there's no play in there for the wing to wiggle around. Now I want these to be as close as I can possibly get them. But when I'm done, I'm going to make a stack of balsa and cut maybe 4 or 5 of these at one time. Maybe, I don't know. It's 1/8 inch balsa, so it may end up being 8 of them at a time to make an inch thick. Cut them on my scroll saw. And then what I'm going to do is put them back on these plans and then sand them to final shape to make sure that that I get it right. Now, of course, the airfoil is super critical as far as shape goes. But if you really want to build a warp into a wing, you get this crooked, the trailing edge crooked or the leading edge crooked, you'll never be able to trim that airplane right. It will never fly straight and level. Don't ask me how I know that. Normally, I write with crayons, y'all. I don't write with a pencil. Last but not least. Remember, if you do this correctly, everything is going to be the same. Whether it's right, whether it's wrong, it's all going to be the same. So another important thing, when you trace a former or a rib or whatever, see that W3? I'm going to write that right there. Now, it also calls for a hole right there. That is for a paper tube to support wires for your servo, and in my case, I'm going to put lights on this plane, so I'll be running lights out to the wingtip, so that'll support the wires, so they're not just flopping around inside of the wing. But it's very important that you get that done, because if you see here, W3 rib is for aileron. So it has movement this way. Now I'm kind of on the fence here, because if you look at, tell you what, Alexa, turn on workbench light. Okay, so if you look at the inboard ribs, more closer to the center of the wing, they're hinged for flaps, so that when you're flying along, you don't have this gap here on the top of the wing. It seals up. Well, that's well and cool and all, but I personally like to have a lot of ailerons. So I may very well make all of my ribs this shape, so that I can mix flaps, or I can have a full aileron all the way down the wing. I know some people say that's overkill. So be it, but I like having a lot of aileron authority, even on a plane that's a gentle flyer, as they would say about this plane. So anyway, that is how, and you can see there, I've got that rib drawn out, and I can cut it out, and then I can transfer it, because it's fairly thick, so I can make it a template. Now, the one thing you're going to find is when you cut it, you're going to want to cut to the inside of this line, so that when you draw it onto the balsa, you don't end up with a rib that's bigger than what you're looking to do. So anyway, this is one of the things that I've been worried about too much, but I figured I'd just go on and do it, and I figured I would show you how I do it. I'm gonna cut them out. You guys don't need to see me cutting out paper dolls out here in the windsock, but we will come back after I get all these done, and when we begin to start prepping for our cutting out of the ribs.